Today we are lucky to have with us Professor Ian Angell, professor from Information Systems from London School of Economics. He retired from LSE and now he is Professor Emeritus. And he is a known authority in systems engineering, systems thinking, and various aspects related to system. So, as part of the endeavor to foster systems engineering, today we will be having a freelance discussion with Professor Ian Angell on different aspects of
Well,
systems.
we can start by disagreeing.
Exactly.
Because systems can't be engineered.
Exactly.
A system is introduced into the environment as an engineered installation.
Exactly.
It's left there, and then all hell breaks loose. It interacts with human
Right.
activity systems around it.
Mhm.
The system is what it becomes,
Yeah.
not what it is intended to be.
Yeah.
So you mustn't think of a system as something that you can plan and control. It doesn't work like that.
Yes.
So systems engineering I have real problems with.
Okay. So let me ask you, because this is one of the other viewpoint. I wanted to actually bring forth as a part of the discussion. Is that because to a large extent, lot of the concepts in systems engineering has been related to military related products, and to a large extent, the people with the pure systems viewpoint call this engineering installations.
Yes.
So can you little bit elaborate on that?
That's like, can you describe the world in 30 seconds?
Yeah, but take your
But
time.
think about an observer in the
Okay.
world, and he is looking at an agglomeration of events, a
Okay.
whole mess of events going on. And that observer thinks that he can see structure in what he observes. And one of the things they do that is to put a boundary around the events. So what you have is the system, and you have the environment.
Yes.
And then there's a boundary, which unfortunately is ambiguous because it's part of the environment, it's also part of the system.
Yes.
There will be channels through the environment that send messages from the system out into the wider world, the environment, and these channels, feedback will come into the system, and the system will then change.
Yes.
Now, the problem with this is that there's always an observer.
Yeah.
If you change the observer, they will see something totally different.
Could you elaborate by an example, please?
The simplest example that I've seen was one given by my good friend Peter Checkland, who was professor of systems at Lancaster University, who wrote some super books on soft systems engineering. And he says, think about the penal system, the jails.
Okay. Correction.
He said,
facility.
what do governments think the penal system is? They think it's a correctional facility, and it keeps the bad guys off the streets for so many years.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then he said, what do the criminals think the penal system is? And he says, they think it's a university of crime. Young criminals go in knowing nothing about crime, and they meet all the old lags who teach them all the techniques of criminality. So you have exactly the same situation.
Yes.
Exactly the same events going on,
Yeah.
but from one perspective it's a correctional facility, from another it's a university of crime.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by the problem of it depends on the observer.
Yes. So the observer of the system
Of the system is going to define what the system is. There's a choice. There's
Yes.
always a choice. So systems are never objective. They're never absolute.
Yes.
They are the choice of the observer. And once you set it up, then you have the channels between the system as you've defined it and the outside world. Information goes back and forth. Feedback, because the result of the messages going out from the system into the environment has a result.
Yes.
And this comes back and it changes.
Yes.
And that change could raise all sorts of complexities.
Okay.
And so you start off with a very simple installation,
Mhm.
and you end up with a horrendously complicated system.
Yes.
Now, one of the prime ideas within systems thinking is the notion of emergence.
Yes.
When a system gets so complex that you can't cope with it,
Yes.
it creates a simplification, but at a different level.
Okay.
Okay, so I suppose one of the best examples of emergence is life. Okay,
Mhm.
you can think of the chemicals. You can think the system of chemistry. Okay,
Yes.
pottering around there, blah, blah, blah. It gets so complicated the way everything's interact. You end up with the primeval soup,
Yes.
and suddenly out of that soup pops up life.
Okay.
But it was not predictable. You see, emergence is not predictable.
Yeah. Emergence of a system is actually not predictable.
It's not so there is no prediction.
So, in a way, if I make a statement that a system where you put an installation and it creates sufficient complexity around it, it gets to a point where the complexity matures that it is so complex that you can't handle it. Something new emerges out of it.
Well, just look at the internet. You
Yes.
know, it's hugely complicated now.
Yes.
And think of the social problems
Yes.
that have come
Out of
out of it,
Yeah.
which when it started, when the World Wide Web started, it was just a very simple communication device.
Yes. ARPANET.
And now look at it now. You know, you've got Amazon
Yes.
appearing from nowhere
Yes.
to be a huge corporation.
Yes.
eBay. So all of these things, because what these individuals did, what the innovation did, was to say, let's look at the basic installation and the simple system around it, and then say, let's put it into a different human activity system. And so let's put it in trade. Let's put it in auctions. And so the idea was, how can I use the internet to run an auction?
So a different manifestation of the system was being thought.
And then, of course, the system of the internet includes all of Amazon, and so it absorbs it. So now the system is even bigger.
Yes, and the boundary has gone
And the boundary has moved out and
Yes.
has absorbed all this, and is highly complex and is uncontrollable.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by system. It's a dynamic thing. You start off with something simple, a simple installation,
Yes.
and then bingo.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to ask you specifically is that because a lot of the people who are part of the systems, systems or systems engineering and all other aspects, have a general way of saying that, well, A plus B gives you C.
As you see.
Okay. And from a systems viewpoint, how would you, because it's mostly people try to linearize things.
Yeah, and the world is not linear, and the environment is certainly non-linear.
Okay. Can you a little bit, because for the benefit of the people, students, can you elaborate a little
Well,
bit?
the idea that A plus B equals C. Okay,
Yes.
now, of course, I agree, A plus B equals C.
Mm.
So you stick it out there in the system, but before A can meet B to be added, A is interfered with Z, B is interfered with Q, PR, so they don't even exist
Anymore.
when they come together. So it's all very well saying, I'm going to get C. The answer is no, you're not. Because something else has happened. And that's the complexity. So, and this is the feedback. You see, this is the problem of all research, is categorization. How do you categorize the things that you see? How do you categorize the things that are in the system? And the answer to that is it's a choice. How you categorize it and how I categorize it are not the same.
Their choices always.
Their choices always. And what happens is that somebody who devises an installation, which then becomes a system, convinces his neighbors that this is the way it is. And so they accept it.
Yes.
So all the politicians accept that jails are correctional facilities.
Yes.
And the criminals are thinking, ha ha ha, this is where I get a much better skill set.
Yes. Real life
And so that's the way a criminal looks at it and the way a politician looks at it, totally different.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
Same system.
It's
Yes.
exactly the same. Well, No, because the system is the interpretation as well.
Yeah, so it is
It's
the same installation.
It's the same artifacts.
Yeah,
it's the same events.
Yes, but two different viewpoints.
But totally different viewpoints.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to actually ask you is because one of the things that many people don't understand clearly is the importance of understanding different viewpoints, especially when it comes to system thinking. And another term that is confusing to a lot of people is the interface. And could you give an example where this interface, the importance given to interface, has actually made people make a wrong choice, or people refusing to look into this?
Different thing. But you started by what you said. What did you say to begin with?
So what people have a notion normally is that the system is. Lot of the time we can understand the system by looking at.
Yes. Now, I don't believe the human brain understands anything.
Exactly.
We just describe.
Yes.
And from that description, we impose our theories onto the world.
Or perceptions.
And so we are human systems, okay? And what the human system does through the brain is to impose structure onto the world.
Okay.
And that world is uncertain.
Yes.
And the interaction of my structure, my theories with the uncertainty develops risk.
Yes.
And this is what you use to deal with the world.
Yes.
Now, people think that risk is out there in the world, you've just got to go and find it. That's what statisticians think, you know. There's risk out there, let's measure it. No. Risk is something produced in your head. It's produced by the interaction of your theoretical position, your perspective on the uncertainty in the world. This then brings back a feedback of observation. This then enters the cognition of the brain.
Okay.
And using memory, it develops and varies the theory.
Yes.
And so this is what's going on. So you're developing a notion of risk. But there's no such thing as understanding. What you're doing with your theories is imposing your structure on the world.
Or your perception.
Now I wrote a book on this, Science's First Mistake,
Yes.
which talked about the whole problem of a human system, and what you've actually got are a triangle. You've got observation, you've got cognition, and you've got memory. And how do the three interact? Now, each observer is different, and so the triangle is different for every individual. But with the human race, we communicate our perceptions, our theories, and most people just accept the theories that they've been given.
Okay.
So they don't question it. So science is accepted by everybody as being right. I don't agree with that. I think science is a delusion.
Okay.
It's a very appropriate delusion because the risk models you get back give you a utility for dealing with the world, and dealing with the world very successfully.
Yes.
But it's not truth. It's simply that you developed a risk model that, for the time being,
Has a very great utility.
but you see, at the same time, look, you've got science creating atom bombs. So we can end up destroying the whole human race.
Yes.
So that's what I mean by feedback.
Yes. Yes.
And so there's nobody in control. And every system, as it operates in an environment, creates a pollution. There's always pollution. And so when you are going around the world, you've got your theories and you see everything as you think it is. But the pollution of the mistakes between your theory and the world, you're wading knee deep in all this pollution.
Okay.
And every so often you fall over.
Okay.
And there's a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm using metaphors here.
Yes.
But that's what systems theory do. They we use metaphors.
Metaphors to explain. One of the classical example of this is there is an airline accident in UK.
Yes.
And where the people were looking into the interface or the so-called human computer.
Now, when you've got a computer,
yes,
you will have HCI, human computer interface.
Yes.
And what happens? People stare at this interface and they don't use their brains. So there was an example of an aeroplane coming into land in West Midlands Airport,
Mhm.
and one of the engines was on fire.
Mm.
And if they looked out the window, they could see that the right engine was on fire. Okay, but the screen had been wired up the wrong way.
Okay.
So the warning light said the left engine is on fire.
Oh.
So which was working perfectly.
Yes.
So what did the pilot do? Did he look out the window and says, no, it's the other one that's on fire? No. He just said, close down the left engine. So the right engine was on fire, the left engine was closed down,
Yes.
and the plane crashed on the motorway and killed everyone on board. So that's the American. They have a group looking at psychology, and they call this the glass cockpit syndrome. That people are so focused on the glass cockpit that they don't actually look through the screens and see the world.
Okay.
And so this is again a systemic problem. You see, what the theory is doing is forcing a blindness, because when you observe something, you have to realize that there are lots of other things that you don't observe. In order to observe, you have to ignore most other things.
Yes.
Now, if somebody else comes along, what they observe will be different, because they will take some of the things that you've ignored
Yes.
and throw away some of the things that you include.
Yes.
And that's why, and again, I'm using metaphors.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
So, there's a very famous German social scientist come philosopher called Niklas Luhmann.
Okay.
And he says that observation is only possible because it's impossible. Now that sounds silly, okay? But what he's saying is perfect observation is just not possible.
Yes.
Because you would be absorbing everything, and you couldn't cope.
Yes.
So what you have to do is filter. And so what he's saying is the filter is you put in a filter in, you're not observing everything.
Yes.
So observation is only possible because it's not possible. And so what you do is you interject a false set of limited observations.
Or you put a bunch of filters.
Well, everything is filters, you see, because again, the idea that the world out there sends things into your brain is nonsense. Because if that's what happened, we'd be swamped. So what we have to do is we project out a filter. It interacts with the massive stuff in the world. Most of it's discarded, and then what comes back is what enters our brain, our cognition.
Okay.
And that is the way it works. And so observation is not possible in terms of a full true observation, but a false observation is possible. Now, that false observation and the structures may have a utility. And then that means you can make your way in the world. It means that you are no longer at the mercy of the arbitrary nature of your environment.
Okay.
So what you've got is like a sink for noise. See, what the technology does is it's a sink for noise. When you put a chair on the floor, it means you know that you can sit in it. And so that limits the noise around of what do I do? Where do I sit? Where do I stand? And so on. So what a technology does is to introduce a sink for the noise in the environment. And that then feeds back into your models. And so your models then are fine-tuned. Doesn't make them right, it just makes them fine-tuned.
Yes, and so depending upon whether it was a chair or something else that was placed,
and then you have a question of a glass.
Yes.
And then you say, right, glass. I can put liquid in it because my previous models have told me that. But if I put this on the floor and then I walk around, I can end up kicking it. The water can then go into the electric plug and the whole thing blows up.
Yes.
So that's the systemic reality. That if the system is operating within the confines of what was described, then problems don't tend to occur because the noise is absorbed.
Yes. Or you limited the noise.
You've limited the noise,
Yes.
you know, and but now and again there's a problem.
Yes.
and particularly statistics. You see, statistics is one of these ways of pretending that you can deal with the world.
Mm.
Now, statistics works on the idea of populations, and that the populations are ergodic. In other words, every subset has the same properties as the whole.
Whole thing, yes.
Now, if I said to you the system of India
Mm-hmm.
is the same, and if I went to Gujarati or if I went to Kerala,
Mm.
what I'd find is exactly the same, which is nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Yes.
So then you've got the problem of how do the statisticians then categorize?
Yes.
How do they decide how to count
Mm-hmm.
so that it's approximating to a homogeneous?
Okay.
But what they have to do is avoid, like the plague, anything where you have subsystems, and a culture is a subsystem. You see,
Yes.
so they have to avoid the impact of a culture, which will distort any statistical modeling.
Yes.
Now, if you're making shoes
Mm-hmm.
and you use a statistical model, no problem at all.
Mm.
You know, because you don't want to make shoes exact for everyone. Only the rich can do that.
Yes.
So you have to do different sizes,
Mm-hmm.
and you approximate.
Yes.
Now, in that sort of situation, it's not a problem because it's more or less okay.
Exactly.
you know?
Okay.
And so then you've got a very sensible way of using statistics to generate an industry.
Yes.
Yeah? Now, I had a colleague who used to talk about the economics of happiness.
Mm-hmm. Economics of
Happiness,
Okay.
happiness, yes.
Okay. That is.
And then you say, on a scale to 1 to 10, how happy are you? Which is nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Because my answer to all of this is, if you're going to show me measurements,
Mm-hmm.
you have to show me the measuring rod that I agree with. Now, if we're doing shoes, you can show me the ruler, and I'm perfectly acceptable
Yes.
with centimeters and so on. You know, that's not a problem. But happiness?
I mean, what is it?
You know,
what is the
what
rule?
is it?
Yes.
Intelligence. IQ is nonsense.
Mm.
You know, how can you have artificial intelligence when we don't even know what intelligence is?
No, because yes, true.
So you know, what you've got is some very strange salesmen
Okay.
that try to convince the people with money that their model of the world is beneficial to them in their industry and in their tax collecting and also and so on. It ain't necessarily so. It may work,
You may, okay.
but there's no guarantees.
Yes.
And also, you can guarantee that some very strange things will happen. Some very strange things.
Yes. And sometimes you might not be able to understand those
You
traits.
may not even realize what's going on.
Exactly. You might not even perceive that it's going on. But you will still have the wrong notion that the system is working as per your model properly.
Because I was in the British Museum, in the British Museum, that's right. I was giving a lecture at the British Museum on these ideas. And some idiot said, but if we have lots and lots and lots and lots of computers connected to one another, then maybe they'll create a brain. And it's intelligent. And I said, well, yes, fine. But you won't know what it is. Does a brain cell know what your brain is like? So how will you, as a creator of a computer, know what the computer brain is like? You have no idea. So there's no controllable artificial intelligence. It may be there, but you won't even know what's going on.
What is going on. So one other thing I actually wanted to, because one of the reasons with a lot of this thing is, you mentioned about, okay, use a measure, but show me the measuring rod. So a lot of the time what I've seen in many of these systems endeavors is that people using wrong measures. I mean, they might like using wrong standards or the so-called standards, or they're using the standards to...
Well, the classic example is the Mars orbiter, where
Yes.
where one lot measured in centimeters and the other lot measured in imperial.
Oh, yeah.
And when they put the two together, they didn't realize. and the whole thing crashed in flames on Mars.
Okay.
But that was so obvious, you know. But there are other much more subtle examples.
Okay. And another thing is that we also talked about, like an example. I know you worked a lot on this because on your previous experience with anti-money laundering systems and every stuff. And in that, one of the biggest things that people used to say was like, look, we have the last 5 years, there was a large number of like suspicious cases were being reported. And people use that as a measure of success of the system.
Now, this is classic. This is looking at the numbers and assuming the numbers are meaningful. Now,
can you elaborate?
What happened in Britain? What happened in Britain was there are what are called suspicious transaction reports. So any bank teller, if he's suspicious of a customer, he has to fill out a suspicious transaction report. And if it's subsequently found that the teller let through a bad guy, then the teller could go to jail.
Okay, that's how the
system works. That's to put fear into the teller.
Okay, this was the design.
That was the designer.
Okay,
of course,
okay.
now what the idiot designer didn't realize was that if I'm told that if I miss something, I can go to jail. What do? I report everything.
Yes.
And then they become swamped with reports. And there are sacks of suspicious transaction reports lying in police stations unopened because there's no manpower to actually deal with it. So that's a systemic phenomenon, you know, that the people who designed the system of suspicious transaction reports didn't think what perspective would the bank teller have.
Okay.
So totally different.
So that is one of the actor in the system, or whatever is the person who is using the system, one of the user of the system. They did not consider that viewpoint.
And it's worse than that because with the rise of terrorism and because of the political benefits of being involved with the fight against terrorism,
Yes.
many people involved in money laundering said, well, our techniques can be used to look at terrorist financing. Which is nonsense. Because money laundering is about cleaning up illegal money.
Yes.
The vast majority of money from terrorists is actually donated by. It's not illegal
It
at
is
all.
not, yes.
You know, in Britain we had the Irish terrorists. They were all paid for by the Irish Americans in Boston. So there was no criminal. They used to have parties in Boston and they'd collect money for the boys. You know? So how does money laundering techniques help you when the money is legal?
Yes. I mean, anti-money laundering is all about illegal money being legalized.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the few experiences that you had with when you and Dr. Dionysius Dimitris worked in AML systems?
Well,
I mean, that was one of the first pioneering works in anti-money laundering.
One of the first major theoretical works, you know, because until about 10 years ago, most work in anti-money laundering was war stories. There were people giving their experience of what the launderers did.
Okay.
But you know, there was no attempt to try to formulate a theoretical description of what was going on. Now, my good friend Dionysius Dimitris, he created a theoretical, using systems thinking, using the work of Nicholas Luhmann to try to describe what was going on. And so it's quite interesting what he's achieved. But one of the things is clear is that there's always feedback. Now, these systems, these anti-money laundering systems, only tend to get the little people.
Yes.
They don't get the big guys.
Okay.
So, for example, your latest demonetization is a technique of anti-money laundering.
Yes.
You know, basically, there's lots of money under the beds in India. They were 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. That was the currency of choice for launderers.
Yes.
So when your government demonetized it, you had people with huge sums of money under the beds. and they were just bits of paper.
Mhm.
So they had to get it changed for
Good money.
For good money. That means they had to take it to the banks to get the change.
Mhm.
But of course, the moment they take it to a bank, the bank says, "Where did all this money come from? Can you tell me where this came from?"
There's an audit trail.
And then there's an audit trail. So one of the benefits of demonetization is also forcing people into the legal economy. Now, there's far too many minor money laundering cases. The government is not going to go around chasing everybody because it's not cost effective. You only chase people if the return is worth it, because it's very time intensive.
Yes.
So they're going to go after the big guys. But many of the big guys, of course, have already moved into Bitcoin, they've moved into gold, they've moved into works of art, property. Well, the property in Delhi is, the amount of dirty money that's gone into the purchase of property. And then, of course, once the whole arena of dirty money disappears, then you have a problem with the value of property, because there's no more dirty money to buy property, so the property values drop. So
Yes.
this is systemic again, you
Yeah.
see. This is what happens.
So it's the same system but behaving to different.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So some people use this word to a large extent called stimuli, system stimuli, and
Yeah.
those kind of things. And it's like people sometimes say, what is a stimuli? So
well, this is what demonetization is.
Yes.
Is a form of stimulus.
Yes.
The problem is there's no control. And yes, there will be many benefits from demonetization, but at the same time there will be a downside. A number of small businesses will go bust because there's no money in circulation for them to maintain their trade quite legally.
yes.
But if nobody got any money because there's not enough notes in circulation, they've got a problem.
Yes.
And a number of small businesses go bust. And this is a systemic effect as well.
Yes.
And so there's always a downside.
Okay.
But in terms of demonetization, you see, this again is not new. When the European Union decided to introduce the euro, I forgot the year, it was 2000, something like that. What they did was basically overnight say, no more Deutschmarks, no more francs, everything is euro. And you have to go to the bank to change from your money to the euro. So exactly like in India, you had all these people with money under the bed, and they can't go to the bank because the moment they go to the bank, they get reported.
Yes.
And so what they would do was to pile their suitcases full of money, of notes, and drive to Austria, Liechtenstein, Switzerland. Now, the police aren't stupid. They used to stop cars and look into suitcases. And they'd find masses of money.
Okay.
And they'd arrest. The average take in one of these stings was 500,000 Deutschmarks.
Oh my God. Okay.
So that's a lot of money.
Lot of-
money, black money they recovered. So this is again.
This is another.
This is all systemic behavior.
Behavior.
Because you have a human activity system. You have greed. You have people thinking they have this wealth,
Yes.
which suddenly just disappears. So what do? They panic.
Yes. And
So all of these are human emotions.
Yes. And one other thing I wanted to also talk about or discuss with you in this regard is about, for the lack of a better term, I'm going to use the term is alternatives.
Alternatives.
Yes. Yeah. Like so, the systems people always says that when you're looking at the system, always look for alternatives. And people are always like, why do I look for alternatives? Because if I think this will solve the problem, then why do I look for an alternative?
Well, now, you must look for alternatives.
Yes.
Because the only thing systems have in common is they fail. And so you have to find something else
I
to
want you
take
to
over.
repeat the statement for
All systems fail. That's the
Period.
only thing they have in common, is they
Yes.
all eventually fail.
Yes.
And so that's the critical thing. You have to be able to cope when things start going wrong. And so yes, of course you've got to have alternatives. And to have alternatives, all it means is you have people with different perspectives looking at the system
Mm-hmm.
and deciding
Mm.
how to redefine it, how to restructure it, how to think about it differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so you have to have this sort of flexibility.
Okay.
And this is classic Darwin.
Okay.
Efficiency is bad for business. Okay, now efficiency is dangerous.
Efficiency is bad for business.
Efficiency is insane,
Okay.
because if you're efficient, it means that everything that happens is predictable.
Okay. Yes.
If anything different happens, there's nothing you can't cope with it, because you have no mechanisms for coping with it, because you have one way to be efficient. You have the right one way of working.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if something odd happens, then
You don't know what to do.
you're done, and then you're dead.
Mm.
Now, in biological terms, you have species that force themselves into a niche,
Mm-hmm.
and then through environmental changes, of course, the niche disappears and they become extinct.
Yes.
So it's the same with systems. If you are an efficient system in a particular niche, when
The
the niche
change-
changes,
Yes.
you're dead.
Yes.
So you always have to have this a possibility of alternatives,
Yeah.
of flexibility,
Mhm.
and that's when people say, you never learn from success; you only learn from failure.
Yes.
Because what you're doing when failing is trying alternatives, and then you learn from the failures. When you think of these post-it notes
Mhm.
that made a fortune for 3M,
Yes.
that was a failure. The
Can-
guy
can-
was
can you
was
remember?
trying. Well, he was trying to make glue, a really heavy-duty glue,
Okay.
and he put it on this bit of paper to see if it would stick, and it just came away. And then he could put it back again, and it came away. And then he didn't say, "Oh, I failed. I must try something else." He said, "There's an opportunity with this. This is a great product." So he failed, but in doing so, generated these, what's it called, the
Post-it note.
post-it notes.
Yes.
So he generated post-it notes, and that came from an accident.
And then the whole process it became made
Huge
amount.
millions,
Yes.
So you've always got to look.
So that time that person who actually was trying to make glue but ended up getting something.
Yeah.
And this is where actually the innovation and as well as looking for alternatives, consistently looking for alternative choices and options help you in.
And particularly if you're in a governmental military environment, you have a problem here. You will be developing a new technology which has an application in the military environment.
Yes.
But you also have to develop counter
Yes.
trades as well.
Yes.
Because the other guy could have these, and so you've got to be able to
You
fight
beat
them
it
off.
Yes.
So you have this perversity where if you're developing something, you've also at the same time got to develop
The antidote for
an
it.
antidote. Yeah.
Yes.
So the obvious one of this is UAVs. The drones.
Yes.
Because that's going to be a nightmare.
Yes.
An absolute nightmare.
Yes.
Governments are going to have to spend a fortune
To actually.
to actually not so much produce drones, but be able to take them out.
Yes. And also maybe to a large extent manage them also.
Yeah.
Because at this point nobody's thinking about what is going to be the impact of multiple UAV systems running in the operating in the
Yeah.
sky.
Well, they can bump into each other and fall and kill people.
Yes. And then because
And then you've got the terrorist using the drone to deliver a payload. And it's no good saying, "Oh, we'll make drones illegal." Something like illegality doesn't matter much to a terrorist.
Yes.
They just send it up and bang.
yes, yes. True.
So there's going to be has to be a huge investment
On that-
in anti-drone weapons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you ended up mentioning in our discussion, which kind of I think we did not elaborate on this, is about bitcoins. And this topic I know it's been very close to your research and your heart, is about the blockchains and how this new system of authentication, how this new system of having like maybe like Bitcoin, like a bit rupee, you've been proposing like an alternative financial system. A financial system, I use the word financial system.
Now, the governments around the world are very ambivalent about bitcoins.
Yes.
But they don't see the opportunity. Now, what the Bitcoin has done is to create a protocol and a platform that governments themselves can use to create government currency.
Okay.
Now, with Bitcoin, the way it works is you have this large network of nodes, and there's a record of every transaction stored on every node. There's no central ledger. The ledger is everywhere.
Okay.
So if you go in and cheat and change the transaction on one ledger, it doesn't do you any good because you've got to change all the others as well.
Yes.
So, but that means that all the others have to check.
Okay.
Now, at the beginning, the Bitcoin had a very clever idea that you paid people to check. It's called mining.
Yeah.
Now, as the number of Bitcoins get less, and how the complexity of the checking gets greater, the return for doing the checking reduces. Now, in 2040, there aren't going to be any more Bitcoins. So then you have to ask, what happens? Will anybody check when they don't get any payment for checking? Now, there are plenty of other ways of guaranteeing checking other than the Bitcoin. Now, one of the ways that I'm proposing, which I think the Indian government should think about, is to have a bit rupee.
Okay. This is a new systems thing.
Which is basically, you've got set up exactly like Bitcoin. Okay, the only difference being that the network. See, there are two people who use two types of people. There's the people doing the checking, and then there's the people with the wallets who use them to buy and sell things. Okay, so you know the people with the wallets are, if you like, free riders.
Okay.
You know, they put nothing in. You know, they put no work in. They just use the coins to buy and sell. Now, they may pay a little to the owners of the wallets. You know? Now, so in order to get a government Bitcoin, and of course, the Bitcoins themselves, the ownership and the wallets are semi-anonymous. You know?
Okay.
There are people who think that they are traceable. But
Yes.
anyway. But what if a government does it? Okay, where all the checkers are government computers. Now, the government has got masses of spare capacity.
Yes.
So there's no question of will they stop checking, because the government says we must keep checking.
And that's their job.
That's their job. Now, so then the wallets, these wallets won't be anonymous. You get them from the government. You give your name.
So there's an ID.
And it's like very much like an ID card. So you have an electronic money, and you can put money on in the wallet, and then use it to buy and sell things.
Yes.
Now, why should people do that?
Okay.
Why should they put the money in that way? Well, there are two real benefits. The first is counterfeiting is impossible because every coin is traceable all the way back to the point of issuing.
Okay.
So there'll be no counterfeit coins in the system.
Yes.
If the government then says anybody who holds a wallet with rupees in, we will give them 3% tax-free interest every year.
Okay.
And because the government spends 8 to 10% to borrow money. So borrowing money off the population at 3% tax-free is a big winner. You know, everybody benefits.
Yes.
So it means then that the government could then, and of course they would have a record of everybody who's trading with whom. So all the official economy is being traced.
So complete
accountability. It's completely visible to everybody.
Yes.
So the black economy then has to go really underground.
No.
Now, if they're issuing large sums of e-currency, they can reduce the number of notes in circulation.
Yes.
It's another reason to force people into having these wallets.
Okay.
And of course, what they do is they go into a bank and say, here's my wallet. Could you put X rupees into my wallet? And so the money then goes from
Your bank
from the bank account into the wallet. And then you can go around and buy and sell. You can buy hotel rooms, you can buy motor. See, and the joy of this is, if you wanted to buy a motor car with cash,
Okay.
it looks suspicious.
Yes.
Because and of course nowadays with the know your customer rules from the
KYC.
yes, KYC. Yeah. So then the if you use money like that, then the tellers will inform the government.
Yes.
Okay, but now if you have a large amount of money on your wallet, by definition that is legal money.
Because you're already
Because you've already been through the process,
Yes.
it's a guarantee that this is legal money.
Yes.
So you can go and spend cash to buy a car. You don't have to worry, is it more than 10,000 rupees or something? You know? It's guaranteed to be genuine. And that you've earned it legally because how else would it be on
In
the
bank,
wallet?
yes.
So there's all sorts of benefits for the government if they set these things up. But if they start being annoyed with Bitcoin, because I don't think Bitcoin's going to survive too long, because once the miners find it's more expensive to mine than they don't get returns on in their investment, then they'll stop checking.
Yes.
And then, of course, fraud will be possible.
Yes. Because once the checking stops, then yes.
Then change one, and if nobody's checking,
Then
that's it.
Yes. You have 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, right. And maybe like in a few minutes, because we talked about Bitcoin, maybe people might not know about the notion of what is this blockchains.
Well, it's again,
another system.
Bitcoin is one example.
Okay.
Very simple. There's all of trade is about a ledger,
Yes.
double entry bookkeeping.
Yes.
You buy and sell. You put credits and debits on the book.
Yes.
Okay. So and then on the side you write down what the trade is. Okay. Now these ledgers are at the moment stored with one in a bank with the government. There's only one copy.
Yes.
Now, if you have a distributed database
Okay.
where copies of that ledger are everywhere,
Okay.
then you cannot change. See, when there's only one ledger, you can go in and cheat and change. Because
Yes, true.
can you trust the banker not to cheat the ledger? But when it's in a distributed database,
Then
they can't do it.
The only one way to do it is you have to get majority.
And also the benefit for that is the cost of making changes is tiny.
Oh yeah.
So every business like insurance, every business that uses the notion of trusted third party has got a problem because they can be replaced instantaneously. So one of the things I'm interested in is whether, for example, companies like eBay or Amazon will be able to compete with distributed systems where you'd have an auction site which is distributed, owned by everybody on it.
It's owned by the peers.
And it's not owned by eBay. So at the moment you have to pay eBay. But when everybody in the system owns it and you don't pay anybody, then you can do all the deals for free.
Yes.
So you're no longer paying that extra money because it's the question of how it's implemented and how you can, ways of actually checking bad deals. You know, so that still has to be worked out.
Yes.
But there's a lot of experimentation going on.
Okay.
A lot of experimentation, and it's very fascinating. I'm going to be looking at some projects that your students
Yes,
are playing with. So I'm going to be very interested to see what ideas they come up with.
Yes.
Because it's going to be a huge market.
Yes.
Enormous.
Enormous market. Large market.
But you know the insurance business, the stock market, all of these things are going to find their nice, cozy profit. Banks, all their nice, profitable rip-off of the population is over.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some real fun. So here I am. When people say, "Oh, you're against technology," no, I'm not. What I would say is, of course, this has got all sorts of potential,
Mhm.
but you've got to look at it closely, just in case there's anything
Is
untoward.
the like keep on looking for the alternatives.
Keep looking for the alternatives,
Yes.
keep looking for the problems.
And this is where a system that has been existing, like the peer-to-peer system,
Yeah, mhm.
or a distributed system, which is already existing in the
Yeah, yeah,
information
mhm.
system, you're looking at a new viewpoint and having a new use to the
Yeah,
system.
mhm. But what Bitcoin did was to make the checking simple
Yes.
and transparent,
Mm.
so that there was a lot of checking going on,
Yes.
and how they managed that. Now when you can't guarantee that people are going to check, then the system will fail.
Okay.
So there are a number of different attempts being made
Yes.
on how to guarantee the checking will continue.
Yes.
And I say the best way for doing that is for government computers to do it, because they've got so many computers, mostly standing idle.
Mm.
So these could all be
Used
doing the checking,
Yes.
because all it means is the ledger is stored on the computer and it's just checked.
Check.
So all the transactions are checked. So every time you buy and sell something, the government computers check, and they also make a record of who bought and who sold.
Yeah. So the market, the products and other things are all legitimate as well. Yes.
Yeah. And so everything is and so also it means that if there's a problem
Mhm.
where you cheated,
Mm.
you've got a record of the trade.
So then your reputation is
So,
also
so you've got all sorts of, and anybody who cheats, of course, will end up on the record.
Mhm.
And then you have to be honest,
Mm.
or you lose all the business.
Yeah.
So there are some very good benefits.
Benefits out there.
But who knows? Every system is flawed. Every system has the seeds of its own destruction.
Yes.
So we'll see.
The one thing that is common is all systems will fail.
All systems will fail.
Yes. Well, thank you
It's
for
a great pleasure,
It's a
Deepu.
great
It's always
pleasure.
a pleasure to talk
It's
to you.
always a pleasure to have you here.
Time just flies.
Time flies. Yes.
Time flies when you're enjoying yourself.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.